Hey, Bobby. Can I call you Bobby? I just wanted to apologize for not getting back to you about your invitation to debate. I won't make excuses like, I've been busy with family or yard work or being a decent person. You won't hear that from me. No excuses from this guy. Just a sincere, humble apology. Mea culpa. With that out of the way, I'd like to offer an official response to your challenge. Before I do that, let me note here that in a blog post you referenced a tweet wherein I said, I just wanted to stop in and say, fuck Robert Clifton Robinson. You said it was my response to your challenge, but I just wanted to clear the air and say it's not. Given how you manipulated and cropped the tweet, it could be understood that way, but that tweet had nothing to do with your challenge. My words were in response to what you said using your sock account at LiarSlayerIam, wherein you claim that atheists suffer from mental illness and that things like anxiety and paranoia are symptoms of those who belong to Satan. What a condescending and belittling thing to say. I loathe it when atheists refer to religion as a mental illness, and it's just as bad when theists say similar things about atheists. I'd say I expect better from you, but we both know you're not capable of it. So here is my official response to your invitation to debate. No. No, Bobby. I will not debate you. And the reason I won't debate you is quite simple. You're not a serious person. I know how you'll respond. You'll probably refer to me as weak and incompetent or something along those lines. That's fine. You can think whatever you want about me and my unwillingness to debate you. Call me a coward. Say I have mental illness and belong to the devil. Impeach me. I don't really care. To quote the great scientist Rick Sanchez,
"Your booze mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer."
Let me circle back to the reason I won't debate you. As I said, you're not a serious person. Nowhere is this more evident than in your voluminous writings on your website. Let's consider a few examples. First up is a post entitled Impeaching Dr. Josh Bowen and the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, published on June 17th of this year. Now, there is so much that could be said about this blog post, from your jumping the gun on the cursed tablet from Mount Ebal to this bizarre map with its references to the Amortites and Hivites. Truly, it's all a testament to Dunning and Kruger. Instead, I want to briefly consider this section. Contrary to the assertions of Josh Bowen, God did not commit genocide, he rendered a righteous judgment. Setting aside the straw men and your abysmal reading skills, you made a couple of assertions about the Canaanites and their purported sacrifices to Moloch. You write, archaeologists have uncovered the ruins of Canaanite villages and found the remains of clay jars that were used in their ritual worship. Newborn babies were dismembered, and their body parts were placed inside these jars and sealed inside the walls of newly built homes to bring the blessings of their brutal gods. You offer two endnotes, numbers 21 and 22. When I looked at these two notes, I found a quote from a website that states excavations near Gezer, dated to the 2nd millennium BCE, yielded clay jars containing the charred bones of babies. The quote comes from the website Baal.com. By the way, the link you listed doesn't work, so you might want to fix that. If you read the piece, Divine Overview of Baal, a couple of things stick out. The first is that the author is Web Scribe of Baal. That should be the first red flag. Who is this individual? What are their credentials? The second is that the web scribe doesn't offer any citations for their claims. That's another red flag. How do they know about this archaeological evidence? What does current research say about it? The reason all of this is important is because neither you nor I are experts. Consequently, we depend on others who are experts, who hold relevant credentials. This means published, peer-reviewed research from reputable authors. The web scribe of Baal just doesn't make the cut. Moreover, it seems that the scribe is using outdated research. Let me explain. First, finding the bodies of infants and children in clay jars is not out of the ordinary. In her contribution to Telet and Gath, Studies in the History and Archaeology of Israel, Beth Alpert Nakai writes that the custom of burying infants in store jars has been identified in the archaeological record from as early as the Pottery Neolithic. In the Levant, the infant jar burial, IJB, remained a revered funerary custom into the Iron Age and beyond. The era in which it was most popular, however, was the Middle Bronze Age, during which time IJBs could be found at sites ranging from Syria to the eastern Nile Delta. Most, however, are found in the southern Levant. Nakai, an expert in Syro-Palestinian archaeology, later explains that burials of infants in jars were most commonly intramural, set under the floors of houses and courtyards, but on occasion IJBs were deposited in communal tombs. The question becomes, why the need to bury infants? Is it because they were ritualistically sacrificed? Maybe, but a more parsimonious answer is available to us: high infant mortality rates. Nakai writes, demographic statistics indicate that in antiquity, some third of all infants did not survive their first year, and nearly half did not survive past 5 years of age. For example, at Gezer, the city in question in the Baal.com post, Nakai notes that of over 88 individuals buried at a cave from the late Bronze Age, 35% were under 12 years of age. At other sites, the numbers are even higher. Given mortality rates as high as these, she writes, it seems surprising that IJBs were the least common type of burial in the Middle Bronze Age. The point is, Bobby, that lots of kids died in antiquity, including in the Middle Bronze Age, and many of the smallest children, infants included, were buried in store jars. It's not evidence that they were sacrificed to Molech or whoever. In fact, your claim that these jars were used in ritual worship, based on the Baal.com article's assertion that the jars were found at a shrine, is itself problematic. When Gezer was first excavated, early researchers like Robert McAllister claimed that the jars were found in a high place. But, as Heath Durrell, a scholar who literally wrote a book on child sacrifice in ancient Israel, notes, re-excavations of Gezer, done by William Dever, show that the high place belongs to a period after that of the infant burials. That is, the infant burials are older than the cultic site. Durrell writes, without a cultic installation at the burial site for the infants, the more mundane explanation, that the area served as a simple infant cemetery, becomes the more likely one. And because some scholars had used the older data about Gezer as proof of child sacrifice in other cities, eliminating the Gezer evidence meant that there was nothing to suggest that the burials at the other two sites should be understood as anything other than mundane infant burials. Thus disappeared any archaeological evidence for child sacrifice in Bronze Age Cisjordan Canaan. And here is why I know you're not a serious person. Given the choice between citing accomplished scholars like Durrell and Nakai and citing the web scribe of Baal, you'll choose the web scribe every time. Why? Because it confirms your bias. If tomorrow they found incontrovertible evidence of widespread child sacrifice in the Levant during the second millennium, I'd be fine with it. I'm not driven by ideology, but by evidence. But you aren't. Your ideology is the most important thing to you, and you'll twist whatever evidence there is to fit your worldview. That's not how serious people do things. On to the next example. Back in 2014, you published a post entitled, The Reliability of the New Testament. There, you write this. According to Peter Rogers, in 1 AD, the population of the Earth was about 200 million people. By 300 AD, the population had grown to over 250 million. Rodney Clark wrote that the explosive growth of the Christian Church by 350 AD places the number of followers of Jesus Christ at over 33 million, or 56.5% of the total population of the world. Now, I'm not a math whiz, but 33 million is nowhere near 56.5% of 250 million. But it's easy to see where you messed up. Stark, not Clark as you call him, seems to be looking at data for the Greco-Roman world, not the entire world. According to the chart that appears on page 7 of his book, the percent of population is based on an estimate of 60 million people. But you'd have to, read to figure that out. You also say this in that post. If the resurrection did not take place as the four Gospels describe, then how do we explain the explosive growth of the Christian Church to over 33 million believers and 56% of the world's population, just 300 years after the resurrection was first reported? And this is how I know you're not a serious person. If you'd actually read Stark's work, you'd know that his model for the growth of early Christianity is based in part on the growth rates of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, unless you're willing to say Mormonism is from God, you should refrain from saying that the only explanation for the growth of Christianity was the truth of the resurrection. Moreover, Stark himself cautions against your conclusion. He writes, "Thus we know that the numerical goals Christianity needed to achieve are entirely in keeping with modern experience, and we are not forced to seek exceptional explanations. Rather, history allows time for the normal process of conversion as understood by contemporary social science to take place." I know that's the first time that you've read that, but you should really soak it in. Stark is saying that we don't need a miracle to explain the growth of Christianity. Just normal, everyday conversion rates, as we also find in Mormonism. But if you were a serious person, someone wanting to get to the truth of things and present scholars and their findings accurately, you'd have noted this. But you didn't. You probably didn't think anyone would bother to check your notes and make sure you weren't misrepresenting the scholarship. But unlike you, there are some, like myself, who want to get things as right as possible. On to a final example. In your post, does 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 really say that the Bible is the Word of God? You claim that because the accent is on the antepenult in the Greek adjective theanoustos, that the passive is assured. For those who don't know, Greek accents can appear in one of three sections of a noun or verb. The ultima, the final syllable of a word, the penult, the second to last syllable, and the antepenult, or the third to last syllable. Theanoustos has 4 syllables, and so the accent can only fall on the final omicron, the diphthong u, or the first omicron. Now, Bobby, why in the world do you think that the passive is assured because the accent falls on the antepenult? In the nominative of theanoustos, the accent is on the first omicron. There's a reason for this. Most compound nouns and adjectives are recessive. For example, the Greek noun prototokos is made up of 2 parts. Protos, first, earliest, and so on, and the verb tikto, to bear or to give birth. The compound, prototokos, is accented on the antepenult because the accent is recessive. I can offer plenty more examples, and plenty of exceptions, especially forms ending in ace, but this video is long enough as it is. This explanation that for most compound nouns and adjectives, like theanoustos, the accent is recessive, is a far better explanation than the unsubstantiated claim that it's on the antepenult to reflect a passive form. That's just absurd. Also, I can see you've blocked me on Twitter, but can't help but read my tweets. You just can't quit me, can you? But this sort of reasoning, complete with no citation whatsoever, is how I know you're not a serious person. As Ian Mills said in reply to your claim, this isn't coherent. The author lacks a basic understanding of Greek. The kind of person who could write something like this won't have enough self-awareness to recognize correction or critique. Serious people don't pontificate about matters they know nothing about. But you do. You're not a serious person. Now, Bobby, I know that all of this must feel like a personal attack. Maybe it is. But I'm trying to do what you won't do. Provide citations and actual scholarship. And not simply proof texting as you are wont to do, but I've tried my best to make sure I'm presenting these scholars' works accurately. Why? Because I'm a serious person. You're not.